One of the jewels of the $163 billion state budget just approved, free public college tuition. We told you about it yesterday.
Yeah, and another provision. Teenagers under 18 will no longer be housed in adult jails and prisons. Now, both of these issues will impact folks living here in Brooklyn, so to go deep into the winners and losers in the state budget, we're joined now by Brooklyn Assemblymember Walter Mosley, representing the 57th District. Welcome back to the program, sir.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Greg, for having me.
We hope you didn't fly down from Albany, that
No,
you're just
I can't afford
that.
Woof. Can we talk about the free college tuition first? I mean,
Certainly.
Everyone was quick to praise this. There's also a stipulation on it where in order to receive the free college tuition, you need to work in the state for a time afterwards. I mean, what are the pros and cons as you see it as the free college tuition breaks down?
Well, obviously the pros is that it is quote-unquote free college tuition for those individuals whose parents make less than $125,000 annually. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a step in the right direction. You know, many years ago when my mom was a teenager, CUNY was free. Yeah. And it allowed for immigrants and those who are in the lower socioeconomic realm to move up and to provide for their families, get an education at a discounted rate, while at the same time allowing for themselves to be better as professionals and personally, and to provide for themselves. But at the same time, we also understand that we are dealing with constraints financially and fiscally. And this was a proposal that was given to us by the governor. We understood that there were some shortcomings involved in it. We negotiated some of those things out of it. We increased the threshold, but ultimately I think we've decided on the right idea in the right time in an effort to make sure that kids like my son can go to college potentially for free in the city and the state of New York. So we're very proud of that initiative.
Well, you spoke about those strivers. There was a whole generation of people who lifted their entire communities because they were able to go to CUNY system for free, and we have lost generations of that subsequently. Do you think that that is an idea that can trickle down? We know you're not in that body, but you have some friends in the New York City Council. Do you think that's an idea that can be replicated here in the city level?
I believe it's truly revolutionary. It's being spoken about nationally. You know, what we've done in Albany in terms of first in the nation, and a lot of things as it relates to this particular budget, but sometimes last in the nation and some other things. Yeah. But we believe that if we continue to move this way, move in a principled way. Sometimes people talk about priorities when it comes to a state budget, but I think if we move from priorities to principled, what do we think is the best thing for our constituents, the people who live in our city and our state, to improve our state, not only in a micro level, but in a macro level? I think if we continue to move down that pathway, I think we'll be a better state for it.
So looking at those principles and going from the sublime to the ridiculous, we've just moved on the other side of ridiculous now, because North Carolina is the only state that automatically puts young people into the adult category, just walking into the courthouse. Correct. So we've got the age restrictions now for young people entering the criminal justice system.
Correct. This is something that was passed by our House in the Assembly majority since 2005, and I want to give kudos to our Speaker. He put a lot of political capital. He put his speakership on the line. I want to give kudos to Assemblyman Joseph Lenthal, who carried this bill since 2005, who had the foresight to see that what we were doing was wrong. And although that 48 other states before us, passed, similar legislation. Sometimes it's better than late than never. Yeah. And so we're proud that we're on the right side of history going forward. There's some things that obviously we would have liked to have had in the bill.
Like what?
Well, there's some crawlback measures. So, for instance, the governor wanted a 10-year crawlback in terms of being able to seal your records. So let's say if you're a 16-year-old, you get in trouble, you have this record. Right. You have to wait until you're 26 to put in for a request to have those records sealed.
To stay clean until you're 26 and then get it.
Yeah, we wanted 5, which would have been obviously a much shorter time frame. So, those are the things that, we had to concede. But at the same time, when you're talking about creating a new youth part within criminal court, separate and apart from family court, which allows for these particular juveniles to be heard and adjudicated, but while at the same time being treated as a child, not to be treated as an adult, I think is critically important. And then you're talking about also other kids, other children who are now maybe adults who want to have the opportunity to seal their records from when they were arrested when they were 16 to 17-year-old. You're talking about thousands of young people who are starting their lives still, not only here in the city, but throughout the state. So we think that's a tremendous victory for us. Obviously, 10 to 5 is a considerable difference, but going forward, I think we can make some changes. If we can change the dynamics of the Senate, maybe we can make some more progressive changes as it relates to this piece of legislation.
So just before we move on, it's been in the works since 2005, championed by Joe Lintall in Williamsburg and a few other folks. Why the implementation round up until 2019? It's like we're sitting here in 2017. Are there going to be thousands of other young people who get snared before 19? How does the implementation part work?
Well, the implementation is two things. One, who deals with these young people once they're adjudicated?
Right.
You know, is it Department of Corrections? Is it Office of Children and Family Services? So we've come together in terms of finding a way in which we can consolidate both of their powers, have docs be in control of it, but at the same time offer the services that OCFS has to make sure that these young people are properly taken care of, that they're put in the right direction. Another thing that we have an issue with is regards to the closing of Rikers and how this is linked to the closing of Rikers. The governor wants the closing of Rikers within a year. You're talking about 600 to 700, youths on Rikers. Where do you put them? You know, where do you find the facilities and the services to put them in? And so right now, I think although we've concluded with our state budget, we have to continue now with what does the city do with their budget as they start to really go into a second round of budget negotiations and how that interlocks with our state budget. So they're all connected, although there's separate processes and although there's separate budgets. This year more than ever, you've seen where the federal government has impacted the state budget. We have crawlback measure language that the governor is allowed to now, in lieu of any federal cuts that we might anticipate come October 1st when their budget's due, that we might have to reopen our books, particularly when it comes to health care. So, everything is interconnected, but they're separate all the same.
And the million-dollar question to latch onto that is, where would Brooklyn's facility maybe end up, or how's that process begin to start?
Well, we have facilities that already exist, in downtown. We have facilities that are there, and do we want to send children into these types of facilities where they resemble more of a jail and a prison than more of an open facility to nurture young people? So again, where do you create these facilities, to house the proper personnel, to make it more conducive to an environment where we're trying to, take care of young people as opposed to punish them? And so we're quite concerned about that, and the city was, involved in these negotiations from the periphery, but at the same time we understood that the governor wanted certain things, and we had to make concessions in an effort to put this piece of public policy into the budget.
So it is like the political will is there, but it's more of an infrastructure question sort of at this point. But another development question that we've talked about ad nauseum here is Bedford and Union, the armory that's there. So while some people now have to get busy with housing these young people instead of sending them to adult jails, there are other people fighting for permanent affordable housing and development.
It's funny you would ask that. Look, in our budget, we've allocated $2.5 billion for housing.
How much?
$2.5 billion. That was from the Memorandum of Understanding from last year. That was actually negotiated within the extender that we negotiated so that we can keep the government running.
Was that before or after all of this HUD mess with the doctor? I can't commit his name to memory. Dr. Carson before. Oh
no, this is actually happening in real time.
This was already baked in. Okay.
And of that $2.5, $1 billion is going to be allocated for supportive housing. So we're talking about housing for homeless, housing for indigent folks and individuals. That's statewide. That translates into roughly 6,000 units of affordable housing, which is critical. And I want to, obviously give kudos to Assemblyman Hevesy from Queens, who really led that effort. But at the same time, we understand that places like Bedford Union Armory, we always have to negotiate that as well. So we're in Albany, we're in City Hall, myself along with my councilwoman, Lori Cumbo, are negotiating with the state, negotiating with the city in an effort to increase our number of affordable, quote unquote, affordable units. And I'm talking about affordable as it relates to the neighborhood that it exists right here and here and
This
now.
Westchester AMI.
As it stands now, do you support that project for
Right now,
Bedford
we're
Union?
negotiating right now, so it depends on how much we're able to get out of the developer in terms of the number of affordable units, real affordable units as it relates to the neighborhood average medium income. And I think we're in the right direction. We're talking about, obviously the issue of the asbestos that's in the roof of the facility and negotiating with the engineer to not just encapsulate that, but to actually remove it and replace it with a more resilient and sustainable roofing. So
If they say 50% affordable right now, what percentage would you want?
no. Obviously our aspiration is for 100%, and obviously you start from there, and then as you negotiate, as reasonable people do, you find a gray area where we can make concessions. But obviously we want to make sure that we get as close to 100% as possible, particularly as it comes to 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms, so that families can continue to work, can continue to live and thrive in North Crown Heights.
So we know what budget time is like around here because we can't book anybody. Everyone's saying, oh, I have a meeting with this one or that one, and we're working on the budget. But what's budget time like for you and your colleagues up there? Who are the loudest voices?
Well,
is the lobbying effective? Like, what is it really like when you're in those rooms?
This is the first time in 6 years, 7 years, I believe, that we've had a late budget.
Yeah.
But this year was unlike any other year because we had so many other moving factors and so many things that we're anticipating from the federal government that we had to make sure we got it done right, as opposed to getting it done wrong and getting it done on time. But at the same time, we also understand that our budget is made 70% of our budget is made up of is health and education. And as you see what's happening in Washington, D.C., as they continue to talk about repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act, we don't know what that's going to have an impact on our Medicaid reimbursement. We don't know what type of impact that's going to have on our hospitals. We don't know what kind of impact that's going to have on our personnel. So we have to understand that maybe in October, we're probably going to have to come back to Albany, have a special session in an effort to deal with that real-time issue that will impact not only our city, but our state.
Is there a rift between Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio? We only have 20 seconds, so we'll get you out of here on this.
It's two highly intelligent, powerful people. No, it doesn't put me in the middle at all because I stay out of the personal realm of people's likes or dislikes or perceived likes and dislikes, and understand that this is about business. This is about the business of advocating and governing for the people who represent.
How about this? Are you endorsing anyone for Brooklyn DA?
Right now, we are still in the process of doing that, but as a member of the executive committee of Kings County, we will be having meetings shortly after this date in an effort to talk about who we believe is going to be the best person to lead us in the district attorney's office.
So since we're doing lightning round, yesterday we talked about Governor Brown out in California and that state legislature moving forward with some things that would make them a sanctuary state as they define it. Do you think that's a possibility in New York?
You know what? I would love to see us move in that direction. Like I said, we're going to anticipate having a special session come later this year, and I would love to see that be a part of our discussion as it relates to immigration reform and embracing our immigration population here in the city.
So yesterday we also talked about sort of putting this $165 million education bill, the college tuition thing, into the context, and we talked about the money that's going to be dedicated to that versus the money that comes with expenditure things for other members of the body. So I'm just wondering what your pet project is. Where would you like to see the money go with your discretionary cash?
Well, like I said, we are negotiating the Bedford Union Armory. Obviously, they're going to be looking for some forms of subsidies from the city and the state,
right,
in an effort to make it 100% or close to 100% affordable. We have the issue with the Rogers Avenue shelter that there's an integration of transitional and permanent housing. Again, we're going to be talking to the state in terms of finding a way in which we can make that a 100% affordable, permanent housing facility. So those are the two things that I'm kind of working on that are on my wish list going forward.
Well, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be on BK Live. It's an honor, and we always appreciate you having
Thank you for having me on BK Live.
Of course,
it's always a pleasure.
Keep us
Thank you for being
updated.
here.
We'd love
Yes,
to hear how
please.
those projects move forward.
I will look forward to it. And I look forward to joining you on No Sock.
That's all, Brian.
Done.
Thank you.